Arr, happy little games. Hey everybody, just a quick reminder that if you enjoy this content or any of my videos, be sure and leave a like. It helps support the channel and allows my videos to move it on up with YouTube's algorithm. Thanks again. Video game adaptations of licensed properties have been a thing practically since the very beginning. One of the earliest examples of a licensed IP in video game form would be the 1976 arcade racing title Fonz. If we are speaking strictly on the home front, then we have to look at 1978's Superman for the Atari 2600 as being the first. Over the past 45 years, we have had a number of good adaptations, including titles such as Catwoman, Enter the Matrix, Superman for the Nintendo 64, and Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen and the Kingdom of the Crystal Meth.
Take it, Ashley. Your turn, Mary-Kate.
Today, we are going to talk about an IP that translated wonderfully into a pretty fun game. This IP was based on a movie that in itself was based on an early 1900s novel. The name of the franchise we are taking a look at today is Hook, which was based on the Steven Spielberg movie and was released in the arcades and at home in 1992. The arcade game is a 4-player simultaneous fantasy brawler that provided not only lots of pan-on-man action, but also allowed you to play as someone wearing some pretty spiffy tights. Who was the original actor they wanted to portray Captain Hook? What had to be changed late in development before the game could be released? So let's have a chat with Tinkerbell and fly away, because this is the history of Hook, the movie and the games. If we are going to discuss the history of Hook, then we have to go back not only to 1992, but even further back to the 1902 novel, The Little White Bird, in which Peter Pan made his debut as a 7-day-old baby who was flown from his nursery in London with the fairies and birds who taught him how to fly. In the original stories, Peter's appearance was never described in detail, leaving it to the imagination of the reader, although later his outfit is described as being made of autumn leaves and cobwebs. His early costume was often described as having a red tunic along with dark green tights. Throughout the years, various adaptations would come to pass, with Disney's own animated movie providing his iconic green tunic. In the early 1980s, Steven Spielberg was looking to bring a live-action version of the classic Peter Pan to the big screen. Spielberg had felt a close personal connection to Peter's story due to his own troubled relationship with his father. From the get-go, rather than adapt the 1924 silent film or the 1953 animated film into a live-action big-budget spectacular, Spielberg wanted to create a new version of the story in which Peter forgets all of his childhood adventures and grows up as a successful corporate lawyer. Captain Hook would return to kidnap Peter's children, wanting to finally settle the score once and for all. Peter enlists the help of Tinkerbell and the Lost Boys to reclaim his memories and rescue his children. Early in development, Spielberg had toyed with the idea of casting Michael Jackson in the lead role and directing it as a musical. Jackson was not interested due to Spielberg's vision of an adult Peter Pan forgetting about his past. Jackson would only agree if he was allowed to play Peter as a young teenager, which, to be honest, would be quite the stretch. One of the early choices to play Captain Hook was Tom Cruise, but the actor dismissed the idea, feeling he was too young for the role. The movie features some pretty stellar performances by Robin Williams as Peter, Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook, Bob Hoskins as Smee, and Julia Roberts in a rather uninspired performance as Tinkerbell. Any movie that has a gingerfied Tinkerbell is going to have problems, but that's just my opinion. The movie would go on to become a modest success, earning $300 million at the worldwide box office. The modest success would not stop the video game adaptations, as this movie provided at least 4 entirely different games, including a rather unique point-and-click adventure. Let's go ahead and start things off by looking at the Little Scene arcade version. This was released by IREM in the arcades in 1992, which is an odd choice considering this type of game is more suited to the likes of Capcom or Konami. IREM would go on to release Undercover Cops and Ninja Baseball Batman, so they definitely knew what they were doing when it came to these types of games. This is a 4-player simultaneous fantasy beat-em-up in which you take control of Peter or one of the other Lost Boys as you set out to take down the nefarious members of Captain Hook's merry band of pirates. The storyline loosely follows the exploits of the movie as Peter fights through the various areas of Neverland with a nice opening cinematic. A slick rendition of the John Williams Hook theme is also present and sounds really good. There are a total of 5 characters to choose from, including Peter, Rufio, Pockets, Thudbutt, and Ace, with each one having different attributes. There are 6 levels in total, with a boss at the end of each one. Typically, you start each game with 2 lives depending on the dip switch settings. You have an energy bar as well as having to keep a watchful glass eye on the timer. The controls are fairly simple, with you having an attack button and a jump button. Rapidly pressing the attack button will see you either knock your opponent to the ground, or you can grab them and throw them, laying out other enemies in their path. While you have your opponent in a grapple, you can also do a jumping shoulder toss as well as a pile driver. After they have been laid out, you can jump on top of them and give them a right thrashing similar to the game Renegade. You can also do a running kick as well as a special move by tapping both the attack and jump buttons at the same time. This does take away some of your energy, but if you are surrounded, it really comes in handy. You also have a wall jump, which allows you to propel yourself off the wall. As I mentioned, there are 5 different characters to choose from, each one having unique movesets and attributes. They are different enough that it does warrant trying these characters out at least once. Overall, in my opinion, Peter is the best. The enemies stick to you like stunk on a monk, and oftentimes there are 7 or 8 enemies on screen at once. Thankfully, the early stages are not too difficult, and it doesn't take too much to dispatch them fairly quickly. However, if you do need a helping hand, there are plenty of weapons you can pick up and other interactive background objects to use. You can pick up baseballs, spears, boiling hot soup, and deadly anchors, among other items. Hidden inside barrels and other objects are health power-ups and gold bars for points. As you can see, the graphics are absolutely phenomenal with truly spectacular pixel art. The backgrounds have a lot of detail and they do a great job at representing the actual movie. The enemies are varied in design, although by the time the last level rolls around, you will have fought a number of them multiple times over, including Captain Hook. The gameplay is fast and furious, and the controls are nice and tight, giving you precise control over your character. At the beginning of each stage, you are shown a map of Neverland with Tinkerbell showing you the way. The 6 levels you encounter are the port, the cove, Dark Side Bay, The Island, Pirate Ship, and the final battle. The bosses you encounter are Butcher, Jason, Captain Hooks, Damon, Smee, and finally a boss rush that results in the final clash with Captain Hook. This last level has a few cool details, such as Peter's son being dressed as Captain Hook just like in the movie. By the way, Smee is the only character that resembles the actor that was playing them. After you defeat Captain Hook, you are reunited with your children and the game is over. The Japanese version of the game did have some rather odd differences. It seems as if all of the graphics have been recolored using higher chroma, with even some of the enemies switching colors. The biggest difference though was in the third stage when you fight dual hook clones. This made absolutely no sense and was never explained, so they have been replaced with an Arabian woman brandishing a sword. This game is a ton of fun to play, especially in 4-player mode. I never saw one growing up around here and was pleasantly surprised discovering this on MAME. Speaking of arcade titles, there was also a Hook pinball machine. Regarding the license for this game, there was a miscommunication with all parties involved. Late in development, it was discovered that they did not have the license for the actors' likenesses, so all the graphics had to be changed to the watered-down generic versions that we received. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other different versions of the game. The film was translated to a number of video game adaptations, with the first one released for the Super Nintendo in 1992. It was brought to us by the Yuki Yotai Company and released by Sony. This was the same company that brought us the excellent Sky Blazer. With this particular license, there were certain limitations and they were not allowed to use any of the likenesses of the actors involved. This is clearly evident just by taking a look at the artwork provided in the game's manual. This is a fantastic side-scrolling platform game which follows the plot of the movie quite nicely. The story is told through a number of cutscenes, starting out with a rather rotund Peter discovering that his children have been kidnapped. After a quick snort of that wonderful pixie dust, Peter is transformed into the pan and is off to rescue his children and face off with Captain Hook. The game takes place across 10 levels with the bosses at the end of certain ones. The levels are vast and varied, taking you through caves, forests, snowy mountains, and lagoons. The controls are fairly simple, with you having an attack button which also doubles as a turbo mode, allowing you to fly or run fast. It is possible to fly in this game, but only if you have pixie dust. Not only will you be flying, but you'll also be swimming through various levels as well. To aid you in your quest, there are apples and cherries which give you extra energy. There are also extra lives hidden around Neverland as well. Treasures such as a regal necklace and the king's crown can also be obtained for points as well. The action has a more relaxed pace than the arcade game, but it can still be a bit frantic at times. The visuals are gorgeous, and while not quite as detailed as the arcade game, the Super Nintendo does a great job showing off its various colors. Although the music doesn't use the John Williams score, it does sound great and fits in perfectly with the game. This is the game I had growing up and is still fun to play to this day. The Sega Genesis version is based on the Super Nintendo title, although the graphics are extremely washed out. Gone are the bright, vibrant colors, having been replaced with browns and grays. To be expected, the music has also taken a bit of a hit, but it's still not bad. It controls pretty much the same as the Super Nintendo version. Sticking with the Sega CD version is basically the Sega Genesis version only on steroids. For starters, the audio has been upgraded significantly and features John Williams' actual music, which I will not be playing here for copyright purposes. It also features a fully voiced intro and ending, which is pretty cool. Something else that was added was a brand new intro which shows a 3D model of Captain Hook's pirate ship. A lot of hubbub was made about this in the gaming magazines at the time, and while it is cool to see for the first time, after that, not so much. Thanks to Sega's CD technology, loading time is also prevalent. Nothing else has been added. It would have been nice for Sega to add extra levels or even update the sound effects, but that just wasn't the case. Let's drop a few bits and check out the 8-bit Nintendo version. This was designed by Ocean Software and is a standard platformer that spans across 6 lengthy stages. As Peter, You'll be jumping, running, using your sword, swimming, flying, going up and down ladders as you take out the various scallywags of Captain Hook's merry men. The controls have been simplified just a bit with you having a jump button and an action button. You do have a few options to aid you in your quest, such as sending Tinkerbell to fight enemies provided you have enough symbols, pixie dust which will help you float, marbles that will help you fly, and more. There is even a hidden metal detector which you can use to search for buried treasure. So far so good, right? Okay, here we go. Once you start the game up, you are presented with a map screen and a couple of different areas you can select from. There is even a level where you get to experience a little one-on-one, man-on-pan action as you fight Rufio for his sword. To do this, you have to repeatedly attack him until his shirt comes off. From the get-go, the graphics look a bit wonky. Peter looks like a shrinky-dink version of Joe Pesci, and instead of wielding a sword, he is wielding a butter knife. All of the characters look really pale for some reason. The hit detection is way off, with your knife sometimes going right through the enemy. The object of each level isn't just to get to the end, but is also to collect various objects on each one to proceed. If you make it all the way to the end of the level without the required object, then you have to redo it all over again. These objects range from cherries in the forest, cakes in the caves, coins in the town, and more. To help break up the monotony at various points throughout the game, you may come across flying as one of the destinations on the compass. You take to the air flying among the balloons and the clouds. You have to avoid the balloons which carry sticks of dynamite, all the while catching the balloons which carry marbles. You have to catch as many marbles as you can in order to stay afloat. The music itself is almost queef-worthy, which would have been a first for an NES title. It tries its hardest to be the little toot that could, but thankfully it's not that bad. Overall, if you are a Hook completionist, you might want to check it out, otherwise I would stay far, far away. The good old Commodore 64 version was released around the same time and is based on the NES version. While this conversion turned out good, it doesn't really matter because the source material was a steaming turd. The Game Boy version was also released at this time, which again was based on the NES original. This one attempts to expand it just a bit, as the NES version featured 16 levels and this one has 27. As far as the quality of the conversion goes, it turned out good, but you really can't polish a turd. The Sega Game Gear version was also released that same year and is based on the Sega Genesis version. To accommodate for the smaller screen size, everything has been blown up, allowing you to enjoy each and every pixel of this game. The gameplay remains relatively unchanged, although the hit detection in this version is terrible. The enemies are nowhere near you when it says you were hit. There is also a bit of input lag, which makes the darn thing almost unplayable. The graphics look nice and the animation is relatively smooth. The audio sounds pretty good, especially considering the hardware. It's too bad that the hit detection was so wonky, because this could have been a decent conversion. Thankfully, the game does include unlimited continues for all the persistent Peters in the audience. And that brings us to the last game in the series, which was something completely different. Hook was released for the Amiga in 1992 by Ocean Software, which was the first game of this type for the company. During development, the company was required to read the film script and follow the story very closely, rather than attempt to replicate the typical arcade action as found in the other versions of the game. This one embraces its computer roots and is instead a point-and-click adventure. Point-and-click adventures were popular at the time, with the most successful one being The Secret of Monkey Island. I'm sure Hook was done to take advantage of this game's success, but it falls way short. The game starts off with a fantastic opening with excellent music and slick visuals. Peter comes home and discovers his children have been kidnapped and a note on the door from the big bad man with a wig himself. At this time, Tinkerbell makes herself known and whisks you back to Neverland. Once again, this license did not include the actors' likenesses, so what we are given are Dollar General versions of each character. You are allowed to walk around Neverland solving puzzles to advance further in the game. You move your pointer using the mouse, which will highlight certain icons. Anybody familiar with these types of games will know what to expect, but you can examine items, add them to your inventory, use items, talk to the various heroes and scoundrels of Neverland, etc. It's a definite change of pace from what was brought before us on the other systems, so if you like these types of games, it's not bad, but it's not a patch on Monkey Island. While you are playing, you'll notice at the bottom of the screen 2 separate images of Peter Pan and Captain Hook. These characters' facial expressions will change depending on the player's progress. Tinkerbell also accompanies Peter, providing hints and clues throughout the game. It is a pretty short game, and I completed it in under 2 hours. This title was also released for the Atari ST and PC. For some strange reason, the Amiga and Atari ST versions do not have in-game music. These versions are deathly quiet with the occasional grunts and groans and voice clips scattered throughout. I've decided to showcase the PC version as it sounds pretty good. A version was set to be released for the Sega Master System, but it was cancelled at the last minute. The game appears to be about 95% complete, with just a bit more tightening of the controls needed. It's based on the Sega Genesis version, and they did a really good job on it. The graphics are colorful with nice attention to detail on the sprites. The animation is also smooth, and the controls are nice and tight. A prototype was released to the wonderful World Wide Web, so if you're curious, you can download it and check it out. And just for the sake of completion, there was also a Tiger LCD handheld version. I always loved this movie and for the most part enjoyed every version of the game. While the NES version had a lot of flaws, it was something I did rent for a couple of days back in the day. The arcade game is a rare treat that wasn't seen by a whole lot of people. It's probably my favorite version, so if you've never had the chance to visit Neverland, all the while being covered in pixie dust and fighting a big scary pirate, be sure and check these games out. You'll be glad you did, matey. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. If you would like to contribute but not sign up for my Patreon, you can always click the donate button up above. Thanks everyone for watching.